I was very unhappy since I was a baby, which is not the case with all bulimics. It's not necessarily they're not all necessarily unhappy as children, but I was unhappy since childhood. I felt I felt apart from the rest. I was separated from life. We don't know what we're doing on Earth. We don't know why we're here, and the world seems really mean and evil. And either we don't feel like we are in the right place, or perhaps we're completely normal. But it's always around adolescence that we develop the bulimia. Whether we feel this unhappiness since childhood or not, we know that something just isn't right. As with many bulimics who have a borderline personality disorder, I was very entreprenant and very dynamic, and I went to mental health centers looking for help in periods of my greatest depression, which was roughly once a year. So I went to meet with the psychiatrist, and they gave me some pills for anxiety and depression, as well as some basic therapy. The therapy was effective for a short while, always until I fell back into a deep depression or another crisis. But throughout all of this, there was still the impression that I wasn't quite myself. And then finally, around the age of 20, I decided to see a psychoanalyst, and it was there that I experienced an episode of crying, and I cried and I cried. And what I thought was so amazing was this experience of crying without having the psychoanalyst pose one single question. It was somebody who had a technique that was very pure and very classic. This was at a time when psychoanalysts didn't speak a word. I mean, didn't speak at all. And then I started to speak about my bulimia, which I'd never done before. I never had the courage to do that with my psychiatrist. And after, I spoke a lot of bad things about my parents. And after, when I couldn't say any more about the subject, I was really upset because I had nothing else to say. And the psychoanalyst also continued to say nothing. After my therapy, I studied philosophy. And although I was deeply inspired by psychoanalysis, I knew I could never be a psychoanalyst. But psychoanalysis has taught me so much, and has enabled me in my work today to determine who is borderline personality and who is not. So I studied psychology and received my master's in clinical psychology. Later, I studied social psychology, as well as group workshops in social psychology. I also discovered group therapy, and I can tell you that something really profound happened because I participated in these groups. I used these groups to help myself become myself, and it was there that I really began to talk. Because my parents never heard me, and perhaps my parents never heard me, because I was never able to speak with them. I suppose it wasn't very fun to have a child like me, because I was always afraid, always afraid. I always thought my mom was looking at me with a look of dissatisfaction, but in fact, perhaps it was a look of worry. And here I am thinking my mother was this terrible, mean person, when after all, the poor woman, she was probably just worried. I tell myself now to have a child like me was probably not a walk in the park.